Hello, everybody. I wanted to talk about handling some objections today. So basically, there's two ways you can handle a customer objection. You can handle it before it happens, or you can handle it after it happens. Take a guess at which one's easier. And it's definitely before. If you handle it before, you never have to deal with it. If you're trying to handle an objection afterwards, sometimes it comes across like you're almost trying to change their mind, and nobody likes having their mind changed for them. It makes it much more challenging. So I'm going to make a few different videos of handling objections before they happen. The one I'm going to talk about today is it's too expensive. So I don't know if you've ever heard a customer say it's too expensive before, but the first thing about handling too expensive is understanding too expensive. So too expensive has zero to do with the price of Cutco. It has everything to do with the value of the Cutco. But if you say, they might say a homemaker is too expensive, the 5-pay is too expensive, a galley set's too expensive, starter sets, down to a trimmer is too expensive, and then they go spend $100 on dinner that night. And you're like, what the heck? I thought you said it's too expensive. No, too expensive means it's not worth it to them, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a homemaker or a trimmer. If it's not worth it, that's a value thing. Now, as a good representative, should never hear too expensive. And if you're brand new, you might not be there yet, but if you work on your presentation, you can get to the point where you never hear it's too expensive, because that's in how much value you build. Now, I can't afford it. It's different. I love hearing I can't afford it. I can't afford it just means I want it. I just can't swing that right now. Then all you have to do is show them a 5-pay or drop down a smaller set or get them started with something smaller that they can build up to later. But if you've been handling like with investment options and showing smaller sets and it's just not working, it's usually because you're trying to handle I can't afford it, or the real objection is it's too expensive. So the key is handling too expensive before it happens. So, and the real key to that is when you're doing your features and benefits section. So when you're right here doing your features and benefits section, that's where you really dig in and build a lot of the value. So I remember when I was a rep, I was new, I was a high school kid. It was a lot of money to me. So I wanted to make Cutco seem affordable to everybody, because that's what we talk about. Anybody can afford Cutco, but that's not how we want to come across at the beginning of the demo. We want to make the Cutco sound so expensive, like it's going to be so much, they're going to have to refinance their house just to afford a paring knife until they hear the price. So when we're going through the features and benefits, I know it says expensive in your manual, but how do you really get that? So when we talk about the handle design was designed by Thomas Lamb. He was an industrial designer. He was the guy on handle design back in the 50s. Designed tons of different things, from helicopter cockpits to cookware to all sorts of different things. But he had a patent on the handle, so he made a lot of money on those handles. That handle design is really expensive to use, right? Thermoresin, it doesn't crack, break, melt, chip. It takes a lot to be able to melt that. You have to have direct heat of over 300 degrees. That's the same type. It's very similar to what they use even on like football helmets. One of our reps' dads works for Boeing. They said they use different parts of a planer, use a thermoresin. It's a super tough plastic. It's not the cheapest thing. It's expensive to use, but it's going to hold up forever. That's why we use it, Mrs. Jones. Nickel silver rivets. The rivets we use, nickel silver is the same metal that a lot of jewelers will use to set diamonds onto rings. They're probably not going to use a cheap metal to do that, right? It doesn't expand or contract, and that's why we use it. We can guarantee it forever. Another one of our reps goes to Cornish and is into music. She said a lot of the parts of the French horn are made with nickel silver, and if you've ever looked at the price of those things, they aren't cheap, 4 digits plus, right? And then we have high carbon stainless steel, one of the most expensive steels you can use on kitchen cutlery, but we use it because it stays sharp really long and it doesn't rust, pit, or corrode. It's the best of both worlds. And then the double D edge. Our double D edge isn't a patented design. Any company could go use the exact same design, but you don't see out there because it's a super expensive process. And then we also offer the ability to get it sharpened, which I'll cover in our guarantee. But when you finish doing the features and benefits and cut the rope, a customer should stop you right there and say, you know what, Joe, you can just stop right there, because we're not going to be able to, it's going to be like $5,000 for a knife. There's no way we're going to be able to afford that. That's what you want them to be thinking at this point. Then when you go over the forever guarantee of once you buy it, you never have to buy it ever again in your life. The other part I wanted to handle with expensive is then when you get to the price comparison. I remember when I was a new rep, I was scared to show some of these prices of the other knives where that's like, it's $2,000. And they'd be like, whoa, that's a lot. I'm like, don't worry, ours isn't that much. That was the opposite. The opposite of what I wanted to do. You want them to say, if you ever get one of those customers like $2,000 for knives, you say, oh yeah, that's only the sale price. It's actually only $3,000. That one's $4,000, right? You want to say it like it's nothing, right? I like to say, as you can see, the price for the Wusthof is only $3,435. You can even on find out sale for like only $2,000. And they should look at you like, did he just say only, right? And you want them thinking, oh my gosh, how much is this going to cost, right? Because if they're even considering a set of Cutco at $4,000, that's what you want them to do. You want them thinking, if this is $4,000, would I buy it? So if the price is $4,000 and the value, they're saying, is it worth $4,000? Is it worth $4,000? Is it worth $4,000? I don't know. They say, oh yeah, by the way, it's actually only $1,200. Price just went down here. if they were thinking about it for $3,000 or $4,000, they're going to jump on it just like that for $1,200. And even if the homemaker doesn't end up being the best set for them, they'll definitely find something that they like, and it will be worth it to them. Bottom line is the value of Cutco is there, and a good representative is going to make sure that every single customer sees the value. Don't just kind of breeze your way through those features and benefits. If you really do a good job building a value, you'll never have to hear too expensive ever again. We talked about earlier of handling objections before they happen. If you handle it before it happens, it's much easier to handle than trying to deal with the objection afterwards. So the objection I wanted to talk about today was my knives are good enough. So my knives are good enough. Here's a question. Has anybody heard of Dr. Albert Moravian before? If you haven't, he's the professor at UCLA that came up with a study that 7% of communication are the words you say. 38% is your tone of voice, and 55% is your body language. 55% of communication is the body language. So 93% of what's coming across during your presentation is not the words you say. And you guys, you know how important the manual is. To follow the manual, that just shows you how much more important your tone and your body language is. So my knives are good enough. We handle that objection right here on the junk knives page. So if you say, Mrs. Jones, wood handle knives are unsanitary, you're being about 7% effective. What we want to do is we want to use all our body language, all our communication skills. So even in your manual, it says make that gross face. And you kind of laugh at it when you first see it. But when you go over the section, you say, Mrs. Jones, wood handles are attractive when they're new, but then they crack, break, and splinter, and they absorb germs and bacteria. It's kind of like a sponge. Have you ever wrung out a dirty sponge? That's the kind of stuff that grows in there. And then when you get to plastic handles, with plastic handles, you want to use the tone of voice that nobody in their right mind would ever use a plastic handle knife. But in your training manuals, just go ahead and write, you know. You just want to say, plastic handle knives, Mrs. Jones, those are the ones they break, they crack, they chip, they fall apart, the plastic handle ones. And they're kind of like, oh yeah, I know those. And they're kind of like, hide the plastic handle knives because they're embarrassed to bring theirs out again, right? But nobody in their right mind should use a plastic handle knife. And then you get to the construction, you talk about partial tang, and then you talk about the brass rivets, and you're making faces again. You say, Mrs. Jones, the brass rivets, they expand and contract, so you get the stuff around there, and if it's green, it's still growing. That's like, when it's green, it's alive. That's like moldy food and bacteria that's growing on the stuff, and that's what they're using to prepare their food with, right? And then when you get to carbon steel, same thing, right? High carbon steel, it's sharper, but it's rusting, it grows. It's almost like you want a tetanus shot. My manager used to say, Mrs. Jones, using a carbon steel knife would be like, imagine having a nice honey baked ham, and right before you eat it, you went and rubbed it on the tailpipe of a city bus, right? That's kind of what it's like cutting with a carbon steel knife. Kind of gross. And then stainless steel. Now in your manual, I would underline a word, and the word is soft. That is the key word when you're talking about stainless steel. You say, Mrs. Jones, stainless steel doesn't rust, pit, or corrode, but it's a softer steel, right? So those are the ones. Now, by the way, a quick little investment is if you go to the music store, you can buy like a $4 or $5 music stand that holds your blue book up. I used to drop my blue book all the time. But one of the nice things to have it held up is you can use your hands to talk, right? So when you say, Mrs. Jones, stainless steel, it's a softer steel. So those are the ones you always have to sharpen. And I roll my eyes and I pretend like I'm sharpening. And when you do that, customers usually match you. So when you're like, oh, those are the ones you always have to sharpen, they kind of roll their eyes like, oh, I hate sharpening knives. And then the serrated ones you can't even sharpen. So you just, after they're done, you throw in and replace them. You roll your eyes again. They're like, I hate replacing their knives. Now, this is the key about that. Is it doesn't matter if they have cheapo knives or if they have a $2,000 set of Wusthof, they hate sharpening their knives, especially if they have some Wusthof or Shun or something. They're like, I spent $2,000 on this stuff and I still have to sharpen it all the time. And you really kind of tap in to those feelings of, man, I hate sharpening my knives. I hate replacing my stuff. So it doesn't matter what kind of knives they have. You shouldn't hear my knives are good enough. No matter what they have, they should always be like, oh man, my knives are terrible. So imagine how cool it would be if you called somebody on the phone and they said, oh wait, you sell knives? I've been looking to buy knives. I can't wait for you to come see me. How stoked would you be for that appointment? Well, guess what? By doing a good disadvantages of common cutlery section, a good junk knife section, you accomplish that every single time. So if you really use all your body language, the facial expressions, your tone of voice, really dig into that, you're not going to hear my knives are good enough almost ever when you're doing great presentations. Hope that helps. We'll see you next time. So the question or objection we're going to handle today is I wouldn't use all of those knives. I don't know if you've ever had a customer say that, but you go through all the knives in the basic set in our homemaker and they just say, I wouldn't use all those knives. Well, most people are going to say that because they've never had all of those knives. And if they actually had them and knew how to use them, then they would use them, right? I remember buying my parents a homemaker +8. My mom's like, we're not gonna use the forks. We're not gonna use the forks. I'm like, well, it's cheaper if I buy it with the forks anyway. So just get it. 3 weeks later, she's like, we use those forks all the time, right? So once people have them, they definitely use them. But here's a good analogy. Take somebody who has never golfed before in their life. Let's say somebody who's never, and maybe it's you, maybe a friend who's never played a round of golf. and you're going to teach them how to golf. So you're going to say, okay, here's how you're going to golf. Ready? See this little ball? You're going to hit in that hole way over there. All right. That's all you do. Just hit the ball in the hole, right? Here's 18 different clubs to do it with. And they're thinking to themselves like, why the heck do I need all these clubs? Can't I just take one? Right? That's like most customers with cutting. They're like, why do I need 10 knives? Can't I just use one? My job is just to cut it. Right? Now, if you take somebody who actually knows how to golf, and you say, hey, why don't you go play 18 holes? Here's a putter. Go for it. They'd look at you like you're nuts. You're like, well, where's the rest of them? I can't. I need my iron. Right? So I need all my irons. I need my my driver. I need everything. Right? Hopefully not sandwich, but sometimes you got to have it. Right? So that's how most customers are with as far as what they think about their ability, how much they're going to use the knives at the beginning. So it's our job to show them how they would use all of the knives, and you do that by asking one very simple question, and that question is, have you ever ... And it's going to change with each piece. So when we get to the names and uses section, we get here. And we say, Mrs. Jones, instead of just saying this is the paring knife, this is what it's used for, they go, okay, I would either do that or I wouldn't. So when you get to each knife, you want to have a have you ever question for it. So, Mrs. Jones, have you ever had like one of those short paring knives that kind of digs into your palm? Oh, what do they say? Yes. Oh, perfect. Well, ours has a nice long handle, so it's way more comfortable. Mrs. Jones, have you ever smashed a tomato before? Oh, perfect. That's what our trimmer's for, right? So those ones, you'll never smash a tomato again. You ever had a hard time making a sandwich where you take like one thing to scoop and you get peanut butter all over your knuckles? Our spatula spreader's perfect then, right? You ever a hard time cutting a bagel or a pineapple? Petite carver. You ever had a hard time getting something out of a jar, turning something in a pan? Churning fork. Have you ever cut something so tough you thought the knife was going to break or it was kind of wobbling? Butcher knife. You ever had a hard time chopping something, Mr. Jones? Maybe you take like a little knife and do one piece of celery at a time. Oh, chef knife's perfect, right? You ever smashed hot bread before? Slicer. You ever had a hard time carving a turkey, like one of those electric ones where it shreds it up, or like getting all the way through a cantaloupe? Carver. You ever had a hard time lifting a big heavy meat or like large turkey, Mr. Jones? Carving fork. So you just went through here and he asked, have you ever done this? And they say, yeah. Have you ever done this? After you've gone through, if they said yes on all those, what did they just tell you? They just told you that they would use every single knife. Right? And if you've taken psychology classes, when somebody says something on their own, it's way more powerful versus you telling them. Instead of saying you would use it, if they're saying, oh, I would do that, I would do that, I would do that. They're like, great. So by the time you get here, if you followed some of the other objections in the series, I don't know if you've been at your team meeting where your manager said, hey, what was the most positive sale? And somebody was like, oh, I went in and I asked them if they wanted to buy a homemaker, and they said, yeah. And you're like, I wish all my customers just said yes when I wanted to buy the homemaker. Well, your customers are the same customers as that representative. It's just that representative did a good job handling all the objections before they happened, and you're trying to handle them after they happen, which is much more challenging. But if you've watched all the videos, if you haven't watched the other videos, there's handling too expensive, handling my knives are good enough. But if you handle all of these, what happens is you get to the homemaker set and you say, do you want to go ahead and get it? And they say, well, my knives are awful. Well, it's actually a really good deal. I thought it was going to be more. Well, I would use all those knives. Okay, yeah, I'll take it. And there you go. And that's the homemaker. So if you do that, you're going to sell a lot more homemakers, a lot more sets, and you're going to have more fun in your demos when you're handling objections before they happen than trying to handle them after they happen, which is much more challenging.